In this episode, I'll be taking a look back at this infamous aeroplane given to DT in 2025, the one decommissioned due to security fears as reported, and I'll be looking at a very interesting sync, or signal perhaps, involving that new addition to the presidential Air Force One. Now, if you remember, back in part 17 of this series, I focused in on that plane that DT received as a donation from Qatar back in May 2025. It was the big story in the news on the day of the anniversary of a certain state, the 14th of May that year. I'd already said in part 16 of this series to look out for this date, as it was exactly 401 days after the infamous Aleph Tav eclipse, and the gematria for Aleph and Tav is 401 in Hebrew gematria. And sure enough, on that date, 401 days after the Aleph Tav eclipse, the big story in the news was that DT had received an aeroplane valued at $400 million, the potential replacement for Air Force One. So another 401 days after the Aleph Tav eclipse, which is 401 in Hebrew gematria. All very synced up. And this is not the only 401 sync here, because if we remember, the Aleph Tav eclipse back in 2024 featured DT himself, the recipient of that $400 million plane for Air Force One, in a symbolically Kabbalistic presidential campaign video that portrayed DT's silhouette ascending to the heavens, eclipsing the sun. Now, within that certain state's mythology, 401 is a significant number. It is the number of the biblical Esau, brother of Jacob. 401 is seen as Esau's number because 401 is the culmination of Esau with his 400 men on his way to meet Jacob, as seen in Genesis, which is also alluded to in various sources which you can find online. And DT himself has been compared to Esau many times, as we have often seen on this channel. Now, this plane, as we have just seen, resonating with the number 401, big in the news on the anniversary of a certain state, which was 401 days after the Aleph Tav eclipse, the Hebrew gematria of Aleph and Tav being 401. The plane was given to DT, who has been compared to the biblical Esau, whose Kabbalistic number is 401. This plane, after being retrofitted for many months, was eventually unveiled as the new Air Force One by DT on Friday the 19th of June 2026, 401 days after the 14th of May 2025. DT also visited Qatar, the donor of that aircraft, for a state dinner on that date, the 14th of May 2025. 401 days later, DT himself unveils that aircraft, valued at $400 million, as now being ready to use as the new Air Force One, 401 days after he visited the country which donated it. Seems like more than just a coincidence. All of this, at the very least, seems pretty significant. If little old me, well over a year ago, can predict this whole thing, as I did in part 17 and in a post over 4 months ago, when I mentioned the exact reason that the plane has presently been decommissioned for, if I can foresee this very scenario, are we expected to believe that a multi-billion-dollar intelligence community would be somehow gullible enough to not see the potential security risks in accepting this aircraft from a country, as reported, is said to be a key ally of a terrorist group in the past, well before the plane was donated? Looking into the foreseeable future, there's another thing to take note of here. In this 25th year since this event, the Aleph Tav eclipse, which featured Esau resonated DT, 888 days after the eclipse back in 2024, is September 13th. And if we remember this post from DT himself, the end of 2025, which featured the number 13 on the 9th windmill with a dead bird on it, DT calls this a bald eagle, the national bird of the USA, the bird of Rome, and Rome is Edom. Edom is the land of Esau. And as prophesied in Obadiah, in this book of myths, Edom falls in the end. The infamous date here, with the number 2 next to it. The second edition, perhaps. A very interesting correlation anyway. A date to look out for.